Oh, you're very kind. Thank you very much. We'll get rid of that noise. Hi, everyone. How's it going? Are you delighted that on the warmest day of the year so far, someone put you in a conservatory for 8 hours? Fantastic. Look, it's nice to see you all here today. So I think let's just start with a very quick show of hands. Has anyone here ever actually seen an episode of my podcast, High Performance? Great. I make that 5% of the room. No, it's good. A little ego death on a day like today is great. What about my time on F1? Any of you see that? Yeah, a bit more F1 then a lot of time spent presenting football as well. But the interesting thing for me, among all of those years that I did all of those different jobs for, the thing that fascinated me was people. So when your team kindly reached out and asked me to come down here today and have a bit of a chat with you and talk about a few things, it was an instant yes, because I said, well, what is the conversation about today? And the answer was the conversation is about progression. And I was looking at some of my notes in the car thinking, what do we talk about progression with people today? Because I think we live in this world where we constantly see other people's successes. We compare ourselves to other people on social media, other businesses that are in our line of work doing our thing. And it's a constant game of progression because no matter where you are, there's always going to be someone ahead of you, right? But I think when it comes to business, what we have to really think about is that I believe it's people before progression, right? It's people before performance. Progression as a business is about progression as individuals. And what I've loved in the years that I've been lucky enough to host High Performance for, so you might have seen on the short video we played there, we've had like 250 million downloads of our podcast. It's not talking to people about where they are today and celebrating the fact they're successful. It's a constant conversation with people about the fact that life is a progression. So I think back, I was thinking in the car today, who are the people that I've spoken to that have kind of shown me the greatest progression, right, in their time? First one, without doubt, was Usain Bolt. I mean, sitting down for a conversation with Usain Bolt where he said to us that his coach told him that before he learnt to win, he had to learn how to lose. And for someone like Usain Bolt, who is like a natural-born winner and wants constant success, he said that was the most confusing thing. But then you think about the fact that in his first ever race, his hands were shaking so badly he couldn't tie his shoelaces, right? When he won his final Olympic gold medal, he didn't even bother tying his shoelaces because he was so fast, even with his shoes untied, he would beat everybody else. Like that is the perfect example for me of progression. I think we often believe that high performers are also born, right? And I think it's one of the biggest mistakes that a lot of people make. When I talk to them about my podcast, they say, yeah, but you talk to people that were just born successful, they were born talented, they were born brilliant. I mean, how many times if you watch anything, do you watch football and they go, God, he was born to play on the wing. They were born to score goals. They were born to drive a Formula One car. She was born to hit a golf ball. Or he was born to be a businessman. It's just simply not true. All of the research points to the fact that high performers are made. High performers are not born. And I wrote down Richard Branson. We had an amazing conversation with Richard Branson. People look at him and think constant career progression. It isn't true. One of the biggest things he ever had to do was sell Virgin Records. Virgin Records was the thing he had to sell to save Virgin Airlines. Virgin Airlines was the thing that took the Virgin brand global. And the Virgin that we recognize today came from the fact that he had that moment of struggle, that moment where he had to, in his words, sell my children. That's what he said to the people that were buying Virgin Records. I was thinking in the car about Gordon Ramsay. Again, we look at Gordon Ramsay like one of the most driven, successful, incredible people on the planet. People don't know the story that he wanted to be a professional footballer. The only reason he's a chef is because he didn't become a professional footballer. So he went to see his manager, it was Walter Smith at the time at Rangers, and Walter said to him on a Tuesday evening, he called him into his office and he said, on Saturday you're going to make your debut for Rangers Football Club. But you just need to play your final game for the under-18s first on Thursday night. He played the game Thursday night, broke his leg so badly he never played a professional game of football in his life. And that's when he had to leave home because he had serious issues with his dad. His brother, sadly, even to this day, is a heroin addict, but Gordon then moved down south. And a charity bought him a set of chef whites and a knife. And that was the very first time that he felt a sense of purpose outside of football. He's now the most famous chef on the planet. And it came from the fact that he broke his leg playing football for Rangers. Ben Francis, one of the greatest CEOs in the UK. He's the youngest ever billionaire CEO of a business. And he came on High Performance. And I said, what's the secret? And he said the secret was taking a backward step. So when he set up Gymshark, he basically realized that he wasn't equipped to be the CEO. So he decided to quit as the CEO of the business he owned, go to a guy that worked at Reebok who he thought knew everything about the world of apparel and fitness, and asked this guy to become the CEO. Ben went right back to the bottom and learned what it takes to be successful in the warehouses and in the stock checks and in the marketing department and the HR department. And now, once again, at Gymshark, which is now a $4.5 billion valuation business, he remains the CEO. And I think we have to get away from this conversation that life is built by successes, it's not built by our failures. And I know all of you in this room today are here because you're talking about next year, but I know from the conversations we've just had, you're also talking about your challenges. And I think one of the secrets in life is to talk really openly and honestly about our challenges. You know, I've just shown you in TV, we call that a show reel, right? But I can also share with you my low reel, because I was born in a little village in Norfolk I was the son of a teacher and a charity worker. And I was at high school, and year 8 I changed schools. I moved from Peterborough to Norwich, and it was just a really bad time to change schools. So I walked into this classroom, and everyone had made their mates, everyone had their little groups already set. It was just a hard time to try and become friends with people. I tried my best, it didn't go well, and I was getting bullied by a couple of kids, right? So my mum wrote to the head teacher at the school, and she said, look, just so you know, Jake's getting bullied. I think it's really important that you do something about it. So at the school that I went to, every month we had an all schools, like everyone assembly. Do you remember those at school where the whole school would come together? So at my school it was 1,200 kids. So we come to the end of the assembly. I'd have been 13 years old. End of the assembly, the head teacher goes, before we finished, can Jacob Humphries stand up? I thought, what have I done? It's either really good or really bad. And he goes, this boy's being bullied. Yeah. And it needs to stop. I was like, fuck. Like, that's not the thing to do to a 13-year-old kid. And you can imagine, like, the 3 or 4 kids that were making my life a misery became like 300 or 400 kids making my life a misery. So I moved schools. A few years after that, I'm going to a new school, and right next door is a McDonald's. So I think, perfect, I can get a job in the McDonald's, you get free food. All my mates can come in, they can also get free food. Not that I did that, obviously, but I thought it's a perfect job. I did that job for 6 months, and one day got called into an office by the manager at the McDonald's, a guy called Terry Foley, who ran all the franchises in Norwich, where I still live now. And he went, listen, we're going to have to let you go. I thought, fuck, I'm being fired from McDonald's. Like, I said, why? And he said, lack of communication skills. Bearing in mind at this time, I was literally cooking chips for 8 hours a day. There was no one to talk to. I was like, wow. And I can laugh about it now, but when you're 17 and you get fired from McDonald's, like, that's not a great moment in your life. 2 months after that, we were sitting as a family having dinner around the table, and it was just in the days before mobile phones, so this is like 96, 97. My dad's not come home, and me and my brother and my sister and my mum were sitting at the table thinking, where is he? Like, what's going on? Eventually, he comes home about an hour and a half after he should have done, and there was something immediately, like, not right about my dad, and my mum said, what's going on? And he looked at my mum and he went, it's my mum, like my grandma. He says, it's my mum. She's done something stupid. My mum said, what? My dad went, well, she's killed herself. And I remember sitting there with my brother and sister thinking, what? My grandma has taken her own life. It was the strangest moment. And it was only afterwards we sort of all started to unpick this, and her husband had passed away a few weeks before, and she was just really struggling badly. And she actually came to see us at the weekend before she died on a Tuesday. She came to see us on the Sunday, and I remember doing my A-level revision, and she came in the room where I was doing my studies, and she went, I can't go on. And I said, Grandma, of course you can. You're fine. Go on. I carried on with my work, and you then spend the rest of your life thinking, man, that was a moment in time that something could have been different, something could have changed. 2 months after that, I went to get my A-level results. And you know when you walk up to that desk where you give them your surname and they give you the result, you remember that moment, that dreaded moment of getting your exam results? I remember going up to the desk and I said, Jake Humphries, and they gave me the envelope for H. And I opened my first envelope, and I remember reading it, and it said A-level English E. I was like, fuck, okay. But in my head I thought, well, if I get 2 A's for my remaining 2 A-levels, that's fine. Because I still get my place at Nottingham Trent University, because I don't know if you remember, but in the late 90s, the rumour went round there was 3 women to every 1 guy at Nottingham Trent Uni. So me and all of my mates were like, that is the university for us. So I had a place there to study media, and I was hoping for an A for my next result. I opened it, and I got an N for psychology. I thought, okay, I don't even know what that is. So I went to see the teacher that I just got the envelope from. I said, sorry, this says N, I don't understand. And she looked at me like straight-faced and said, oh, an N. That's for someone not clever enough to get an E, but not so thick they got a U. I was like, oh my God. Okay. I don't think they talk to kids like that these days, or at least I hope they don't. And I opened my last exam result and I got a U. So I went out that night. If any of you have ever been to Norwich, there used to be a great nightclub called Highs. And I was on the dance floor getting a shout out to the E-New boy, and had to embarrassingly go back to school and redo my A-levels, right? So I had to sit back in that classroom with kids a year below me. You know, the moment you walk in with your backpack, last one to walk in, obviously sit at the back silently, and everyone in front is whispering like, is that not the guy who's like a year above us? What's he doing? And you know, if you'd have said to me at that time, like the A-level results, the fired from McDonald's, the death of my grandma, the bullying at school, if you'd have said, tell me about that stuff, I would have said, well, there's two essential things you need to know. That stuff was hard for me and it was bad for me. I hated it. And actually, it's only all these years later when I sort of stand and have conversations like this with people like you talking about progression in life and progression in business, that I now realize that it was absolutely hard for me. There's no doubt it was hard for me. But it was also really good for me. Because what we need to build in life and build in business is the most important muscle that any of us have. And I can see there are some guys here that definitely work out. And it's great that you do that. But the other muscle that is absolutely vital to be working out is your muscle of resilience. And I talk about this a lot with my wife. Like every time my kids come home from school and they've struggled or they've failed or things haven't gone very well, I'm loving that. Because that failure is building the resilient muscle, the most important muscle they will need. Because my life since that moment has been full of great moments, right? But full of great moments where people haven't seen the bad moments. So I think back to when I was desperate to be a sports broadcaster for BBC Sport, and I went for a meeting with the head of talent for BBC Sport. And she said, tell me about your degree in media or in journalism. And I kind of laughed and said, I failed all three of my A-levels and never went to university. And she sort of looked a bit nonplussed and said, well, what about elite sport? What sport did you play to a professional standard? I said, never have. Played one game for the school football team, ha ha ha. And she leant across the table and said to me, BBC Sport don't employ people like you. This was a year before I started hosting Formula One, right, for the BBC. I remember when they announced that I was the Formula One presenter, and they said, you can't tell anyone, it needs to remain a secret. I said, okay, fine, I won't tell anyone. 10 o'clock on a Thursday morning in February 2009, they announced that me, David Coulthard and Eddie Jordan were the three hosts for Formula One. My phone rang 20 minutes later, and it was my wife, Harriet. And I answered it, hey, how's it going? She went, I've just been on the internet. Everyone thinks you're going to be shit. I was like, well, yeah, this is a bit more high profile than Children's BBC, so there might be a bit of criticism. But can you imagine 3 weeks after that one, I had to stand in the pit lane of the first race in Australia, and the music you heard when I walked out, the chain was ringing down my earpieces, and my boss at the time, the head of Formula One, he'd called me into his office the day before we flew out to Australia, and he said, look, you've got a 1-year contract to host Formula One. The Formula One audience will decide in the first 10 seconds if you're the right guy to host Formula One. If they decide you're not the right guy, there won't be a second season. There's a strong chance there won't even be a second race. So you can imagine standing in that pit lane on your own, hearing the chain, about to go live on BBC One, knowing that that was the message from your boss. But actually, when that person said to me, BBC Sport don't employ people like you, I could have crumbled, but it was all those failures, all those struggles from earlier on in life that actually were perfect for me in that moment, because I'd had all those failures and struggles and moved through them. When my boss said to me, everyone will decide in 10 seconds if you're the guy to host Formula One, that could have broken me, absolutely could have broken me. But again, all of those difficult times were so important in that moment. And that's really one of my key messages really for all of you in here today. Like, I think so many of us move through life trying to avoid the difficult stuff, right? We think that if stuff is difficult and if stuff is hard and if stuff is challenging, we're either not good enough or we're on the wrong path. It is absolutely not true. Like, why shouldn't life be a challenge? Why shouldn't your businesses be full of challenge? Why shouldn't you be pushed all the time to try and find an edge, to try and be as good as you can be? Because the magic thing about doing hard things, right, is that it's a daily reminder to you that you can deal with hard things. If you don't wake up every day and think, I'm going to do something that I don't necessarily want to do or something that I find a challenge, what happens when life actually throws something difficult at you? You have no body of evidence that you can do hard things. So voluntarily doing difficult stuff is an absolute necessary in life, an absolute necessary in business. And one of the things I love is looking at a group of people and thinking, what are the things that bind them all together? And when I think of the 400 people that I've interviewed on high performance, there are absolutely some key traits, right? The number one thing that has bound together the 400 people that have joined us on high performance, from the greatest athletes to the greatest business people to the greatest actors to the greatest megastars and content creators that we've sat and had conversations with, is that they are the light in the room. It's the number one most important trait of high performers. And the great thing is this is free and available to all of you, not just you, but the teams that you work with, the people that you interact with every day. Everyone can be the light in the room. You know, me and my wife, we have quite a different approach to our kids' education. So as I said, when my kids come home and something's gone wrong, I absolutely love it because I know it's building the resilient muscle. My wife is very different. She's like, I'll email the teacher, right? I actually think that the best thing you can do is allow your kids to fail, to allow that resilient muscle to be built in them. Because being the light in the room is actually the crucial thing. So every morning when my kids get out of the car, I say, hey, listen, remember, be the light in the room. You will have a decision to make today. Like, I know you've got lots to do, you've got deals to be done, you've got a business to move forwards. I'm sort of wasting an hour of your life now, but there are two ways you can look at what I'm doing on stage. You can think, I'm not really bothered about this. I saw this guy running around the Blue Peter Garden dressed as a shrimp when he was 21, popping balloons covered in foam. I'm like, I'm not really interested. Or you can just think, you know, there might be one thing in this hour that is interesting. There might be just one thing that leaps out to me. That is being the light in the room. I often think of people as like thermostats or thermometers, right? You can either be a thermometer and you can just tell the temperature in the room. So if you come into a room like this and everyone's a bit negative, you can just be negative, it's easy. If everyone's quiet, just be quiet. Like I see it now with my children. No kids want to be individual, do they? My daughter wants the same coat and the same bag and the same haircut and the same makeup and the same bloody short dress as every other teenager at her school, which I hate. I go and pick her up and I literally am like, which one is mine? I don't know which one my daughter. Then they actually get to the car and you're like, oh shit, they're taller than I remember and older than I remember and they look like everyone else. I think it's the saddest thing in the world. Because these young people are so scared of standing out. Actually, when you get to this stage of your life, you all know the one thing that is going to make you successful is your ability to stand out. If you're like everyone else, you carry no value, right? It's a total myth when we say to young people, make sure you work hard and you do well in life. It's patently untrue. It's total BS. If you were rewarded in life for working hard, someone sweeping the streets in Birmingham or a binman getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, they would be the highest paid people in society because they work bloody hard. Like, that is graft, right? It isn't true. It's about being individual. It's about being the light in the room. It's about finding your own USP, which no one else can have because it's yours. So the number one thing I've learned from people that have joined me on the show is be the light in the room. Because being the light in the room means you're an optimist, right? Being the light in the room makes you feel like, you know what, whatever happens today, I think it's going to be okay. The next meeting I have might be the one that changes everything. Optimism is so fascinating. And actually, as I move around, I love seeing optimists and pessimists. I mean, we talk about optimists and the light in the room. You think of the kind of person that when they walk in the room, yeah, the room lights up when they walk in, right? You think of that person. You know that person. You have that person in your life. I hope you do. What about if I say, who's the person that when they walk out the room lights up when they're gone? You know that person as well. I could say, I'll see you all nodding your heads. And if you've never met the person who, when they leave the room lights up, there's a strong chance you are that person. We were actually doing an event for some teachers not long ago, and one of the teachers at the front put their hand up. And I said, yeah, before you ask your question, what do you teach? Do you know what he said? He said, bastards, right? And I was like, wow, okay. Not only do these people walk among us, some of them are teaching our children. I mean, there are pessimists in the world, right? But if you can live with this mindset of optimism, it is the thing that means you just keep going. It's the thing that means even on a bad day, you think actually tomorrow is going to be okay. And they're so closely linked, this being in the light in the room, along with being an optimist. The other crucial thing about optimism is that optimism creates resilience. I don't know, any of you got kids that play football, sons or daughters who play football? I have a 10-year-old boy who plays football. And the number of times I hear parents on the side of the pitch telling their kids to be more resilient. Be more resilient, you've got to be more resilient in the tackle, be more resilient in the game. And I think these poor kids have got absolutely no idea what that means. How do you be more resilient? I don't think it's something that people are able to understand that simply. But the truth about resilience is that resilience comes from optimism. And I have seen resilient people outperforming talented people 1,000 to 1 in my career. If you think of the people that you work with, the people that do well, or the times that things have gone successfully for you, how much is it down to your talent? How much is it down to your resilience? It's all about your resilience. Because I've shared my story, right, of failure and struggle and disappointment and letdowns. But I guarantee every single one of you in this room has got similar stories. All of you have. And if it wasn't for your resilience, you wouldn't be sitting in this room right now. You wouldn't be working for this business. You wouldn't be excited about what the next 12 months holds for you. Resilience is absolutely a superpower. Resilience is so rare as well. And the secret to resilience is just to remain an optimist, to believe that even when those bad things happen, good things are around the corner. Therefore, it builds the resilience because you keep on moving forwards. It's an absolutely crucial tenet of high performance. The other thing that's crucial when it comes to resilience is vulnerability. Like when I stand here and I talk about the fact that you've been through things like I have, I wonder how many of you tell other people that you've been through those things. I wonder how many of you today thought, man, I don't want to sit in a room full of other people for 8 hours because that is just not good for my anxiety. But people don't talk about that sort of stuff. Sometimes I get businesses that listen to the podcast or they know the stuff that we do and they ask us to go and they want to talk about how they can improve their workforce, right? And often I'll say to them, okay, like, how well do you know each other? And they go, oh yeah, we know each other really well. It's fantastic. Okay, so you know how people take their tea or their coffee, right? Most people know that. Then the next question is, do you know whether the people that you share a desk with or an office with have pets? Some of them do. Most of them don't. What about parents? Anyone here got any ill parents? There will be people in this room right now who are seriously worried at the moment about an ill parent or a child where something isn't right. Or maybe there's something in your own health, physical or mental, where things just aren't quite right. Only when you start to lean into the people around you and have these really deep, proper conversations can you get the best out of people. Because if all of us are operating in business with this shield around us all the time, where it's like, I'm just going to go in the room and tell them everything's fine, here we are, morning everyone, how's it going? Great, how are you? I'm great as well, good weekend, excellent, thanks, right, let's go. That's not really connecting with other human beings, is it? You know, one of the best questions that you can actually ask people in your life is, what's going on at the moment that is playing on your mind? Is there anything happening in your life right now that we can talk about and you'll feel better about it? It's a great question to ask your kids last thing at night. Is there anything you can tell me now before you go to bed that once you've told me you won't wake up worrying about it in the morning? But we need to start asking each other about that stuff as well, particularly guys, particularly in the industry you're in, which is, I assume, male dominated, right? Just judging by the room and knowing what I know of the development world and the building world, it's male dominated. And the reason why this is so important, right, is, as I said at the beginning, if we're talking about progression in business is progression as individuals. People before performance. If you want to operate in a world or operate in a business that's high performance, if you want to hit your targets, if you want to nail it, it is absolutely about vulnerability. Because all of you can do amazing things together if you open yourselves up to each other and tell each other what's going on in your world. Particularly people you have a challenge with. We had a really interesting conversation on our podcast once with a guy called Rangan Chatterjee, who's a doctor. And I said, what do you do with those people that just really wind you up, really annoy you? And we all have those people in our lives, particularly in work. And you know what his answer was, which I thought was so interesting? He said, you need to realize if you'd have lived their life, you would act exactly the same way as them. If you'd have lived their life, you'd act the same way as them. It's this understanding of other people. Like, everyone is just doing their best out there. And the more that we can lean into other people, the more we can all move forwards as a unit, as a collective. And this really, really works as well. I'll tell you a really quick bit of research that was done in America a few years back. There was 2 hospitals, right? One of the hospitals was the hospital you would definitely send your ill relatives to, or where you would like to go if you were ill, because they just made no mistakes. They were like A1 on every metric. But weirdly, people that shouldn't be dying in this hospital were dying. And this was quite confusing, because there was a hospital about 1,000 miles away. It was actually owned by the same hospital trust, where like they were the mistake makers. They were not a good hospital. Every error you could possibly imagine was being made in this hospital. Yet people weren't dying unnecessarily. So this was like super confusing for the researchers. So what they decided to do, because the same trust owned both the hospitals, they sent undercover researchers in to see what was going on. And you know what they found the difference was between the 2 hospitals? Vulnerability. One hospital had a process whereby if you put your hand up and said, I've made a mistake, get in my office, hauled over the coals, fined, sacked, given a warning, removed, made an example of. So what happens in that situation? No one's admitting the mistakes they've made, right? And you will all have teams that work under you or around you who will be nervous about making mistakes around you if that's the kind of result of making those mistakes. The hospital 1,000 miles away had a totally different culture. They had a culture where the leader of that business said, listen, I totally understand that people make mistakes. As soon as you make a mistake, put your hands up, you tell us. We don't look at you, we look at the process. And people weren't dying because the same mistakes weren't happening again and again and again. At the other hospital, the same mistakes over and over again, people dying unnecessarily. I remember spending some time with Toto Wolff, the leader of the Mercedes Formula One team just recently. And I said to him, come on, give me your one secret for how you did so well for so long in Formula One. And you know what he said to me? He said, in Mercedes, we blame the process, not the person. I said, what, every single time? And he said, yeah. I said, yeah, but what if it is an individual mistake? Because I think that's where our brains always take us. What if someone's just a bit shit? And he said, well, if someone's a bit shit, why have we not got a process that makes them better? Why have we not managed to look at their weak points and make them their strong points? He said, there is no example ever of something going wrong that might cost us a race win, might cost us some points. Bearing in mind we have drivers that are risking their lives in the cars. He said, there's never, not one example where we don't blame the process over the person. And the other really interesting point he made was, if you blame the person and you sack the person, where's the learning? How's your business in a better place for going after that individual rather than going after the process? And of course, all of this actually leans into something else that I think is absolutely vital. The people that join us on our show, whether they're globally famous in the world of sport or in the world of business or in the world of entertainment, the humility is off the charts. The humility is off the charts. We had a guy called Greg Hoffman on the show. He was the former chief marketing officer of Nike. And I said, give me the best definition of humility. And he said, oh yeah, we have a line in Nike for humility. I said, what is it? He said, failure is the price of ambition. And I thought, what a cool way to reframe that, because all of us exist in this world where as soon as we make a mistake, right, we beat ourselves up, we criticize ourselves, it's a problem, it's an issue. Humility takes all of that away. You've got to be the kind of person, and you've got to create the kind of culture where actually you say to people, failure is the price of ambition. If you get something wrong in this place, it's because you're pushing to the limit. You're trying to find the edge. And then between us, we don't look at the person, we look at the process, and we try and work out what's going on. All too often, people spend so much time looking at themselves. Their humility is so low that it doesn't allow a business to progress. I've got a great line for humility that I wanted to share with you. I wrote it down on the way in. Humility is not about thinking less of yourself. It's about thinking of yourself less. Humility is not about thinking less of yourself. It's about thinking of yourself less. I think it's a really important point, because failure is the price of ambition, and embarrassment is the price of entry. Every single one of you, and every person that you employ or you work with, you will all know that how good you get at something depends how long you're willing to be bad at it for. And I really struggled with this with young people. You know, one of the things you saw in there was a production company that I set up 15 years ago. We've got 300 staff now. It's based in West London. The amount of young people that come through the doors that have got bags of talent, and I'm so excited to employ them, but I can't employ them because of their fear of making a mistake. It's incredible. We've got to try and create this environment where we understand that actually making mistakes, getting things wrong, being bad at things for a period of time is actually the pathway from where we are now to where we want to be. And the final point that I think I really want to share with you, and then I'd love to answer some questions about the things that are an issue in your own lives and hopefully bring you some real value there, is how much my mindset has changed about what high performance is since we first started recording the podcast, right? So we started recording high performance in 2019. So it's 7 years old. And when we started, I promise you, all I wanted it to be was people talking about the opposite of what I've just spoken about for half an hour. I wanted it to be people talking about digging deep, going the extra mile, getting punched in the guts, slipping over in the mud. Have you seen the film Any Given Sunday? When Al Pacino's delivering that speech, you got to die for that inch. You got to claw for that inch. That's what I thought high performance looked like. I thought high performance looked like pain with great reward at the end of it. And then we sat down, started having conversations with amazing people on high performance. And I'd start to ask them about their happiness. And the answers were incredible. So the first time this really came up was when we sat down with Johnny Wilkinson in a beautiful hotel in Surrey. And we spoke about when he won the Rugby World Cup in 2003. And you remember that moment, Matt Dawson plays the ball across and that amazing left foot of Johnny Wilkinson is like straight between the posts. I said, what was that moment like? He said, yeah, I was happy. I said, how long were you happy for? How long do you think he told us he was happy for when he did that? Shout out some answers for me. 3 seconds. That, ladies and gentlemen, is a pessimist. You're not far on. Yeah, so 3 seconds. What advance have we got on 3 seconds? 3 minutes. A day. Any advance on a day? Anyone thinks more than a day? 3 years. So that makes you an optimist, right? You're at the other end of the scale from each other. But you make a good team, actually, for that. 30 seconds. So you were probably the closest in the room, man. 30 seconds. And I said to him, so 20 years of hard work and sacrifice and graft and grit and determination, missing birthdays, missing weddings, pushing yourself to your limit every single minute of every single day for 30 seconds of joy, was that worth it? And he said he wrote a book when he won the Rugby World Cup, and he said he now looks at that book, which is he'd never written it, because he thinks that book would have created a spike of mental health challenges in young people that want to be professional rugby players, because he was giving them exactly that message: sacrifice everything. And I wonder how many of you in this room have done that too often. And it's so difficult to get this right, because society tells us that if we do great things, then we should be proud of ourselves, right? I remember talking to Hector Bellerin, the former Arsenal defender. There might be a few Arsenal fans in the room. I said, what's your secret for a great life? He said, live like a candle. I said, how do you mean? He said, I've learned to live like a candle in football, because when I was picked by Arsene Wenger, when I was in the starting 11, when I was playing for Spain, when we were winning trophies, I mean, at Arsenal, that's limited moments, obviously, but he said, I allowed myself to be like the fucking man. I was the man. He said, then I got an injury and I got dropped. And because I was the man when I was playing, I had to feel like this when I wasn't playing, and I was embarrassed. So he started coming in when the first team were leaving training. He'd be there in the afternoon rather than in the morning. He would make sure that he avoided the teammates who were his best buddies weeks before. If he saw them in the corridor, he'd whip into a toilet and just shut the door. He didn't want to have a conversation with them. He said, you've got to learn to live like a candle. Like, you can't be defined by your achievements. I'm not saying you shouldn't aim for those great things. I'm not saying it's not amazing for you to hit your targets, to hit your goals, to do the things you want to do, to make loads of money, to buy some lovely stuff. That's all absolutely, like, if that's what you want, fantastic. But what you can't do is delay your happiness to get to that point. Because so many people go, well, if I just do well at school, I'll be happy. If I just get a degree, I'll be happy. If I just get my job, I'll be happy. If I just get a pay rise, I'll be happy. If I just hit this year's targets, I'll let myself be happy. If I get that car, that house, that new job, if I just get this deal over the line, I'm definitely going to be happy when I get that deal over the line. But that's not the way the human brain works. So you have this lovely deal on the horizon as your target. The minute you get that deal, what is that deal? It's a distraction for the next one. Instantaneously, you're like, right, what the fuck's next? It's such a hard way to live, because you get to the end and you're just like, what next? Listen, before I open it up to questions, I want to read you a really quick parable, if I have some service on my phone. Has this been interesting for you all? Excellent. I'm so pleased. So I'm going to read you, or maybe I'm not if there's no service. Anyway, it's similar to what I just spoke about. There's this amazing story about this Mexican fisherman. I'll just paraphrase it. And he arrives on, he's got a beautiful boat, and he pulls up on his boat, and he's got one tuna on the boat, right? And there's this American there. The American's on the beach, and he goes, hey, I've never had tuna as good as this in my life. He goes, why are you back on the beach at 10 o'clock in the morning? And the Mexican goes, well, I've done my day's fishing. The American goes, what, one tuna? And he's like, yeah. And the American goes, well, what do you do with the rest of your day? And the Mexican goes, well, I go back to my house, take some of the best tuna for myself and make some sashimi. I take my kids to school. I sit and drink wine with my amigos. I make love to my wife, and in the evening we sit in the square and play a guitar together. It's amazing. The American goes, man, you're missing out here. The Mexican goes, why? The American goes, listen, you need to catch 5 times the amount of tuna every day. When you do that, you can sell your tuna for loads of money. You can get a bigger boat. When you get a bigger boat, you can get some guys to work on the boat with you. When you've got a bigger boat and guys on the boat, you can buy 2 or 3 more boats. Imagine what that would be like, 2 or 3 more boats. And then, instead of selling your tuna at the market, you can actually create your own processing system and your own cannery and have your own plant. I mean, you would need to leave the little Mexican fishing village where you live, but you could go to Mexico City, and after that, you could move to LA and eventually in New York. And the Mexican goes, well, what? For what reason? And the American goes, well, this is the best bit. He said, you need to listen to this because I've got an MBA from Harvard, okay? He goes, this is the best bit. You can do an IPO. You can IPO your business. You can sell it to the public. You'll make fucking millions. The Mexican goes, oh my God, how long will that take? The American's like, 15, 20 years. Okay, what do I do then? And the American goes, well, this is the amazing part. Once you've sold your business and you've got millions in the bank, do you know what you can do? You can retire. You can move to a little Mexican fishing village. You can have a bit of tuna for yourself, and you can make it into sashimi, and you can take your kids to school. You can make love to your wife. You can drink wine with your friends and play guitar in the town square in the evening. Do not take the American businessman's advice, is all I want to say to you. I'm not saying that you shouldn't aim for the cannery and the IPO and the global distribution and millions of pounds in your pocket. But don't not take your kids to school. Don't not make love to your wife or drink wine with your buddies or play the guitar. Don't take away all the joy that should be in your life because you think that if you sacrifice that, then you're going to get the great moments in business. Because I have sat with people at the top of fame, at the top of wealth, at the top of success, like at the top. And they tell me there's no extra happiness there. And we live in this strange world where we're kind of like giving up the one thing we've got, which is time right now, to work our nuts off till we're in our 70s, to then have a bit of time, and there is no time at that point. So I'd love you to all be successful. I would love you just to take 1 or 2 little things away from what I've spoken about for the last 30, 45 minutes. But the biggest thing I want you to understand is not to be on this hedonic treadmill, thinking that all of your joy and all of your happiness and all your success is wrapped up just in this stuff. Because you know what? If you find your joy and your happiness and your flow and your contentment elsewhere, it makes you so much better at this stuff as well. So please, lean into people. Put humility at the center of your world. Be vulnerable with other people around you. Be the light in the room. Be optimistic. And please remember that people before performance is what will get you the greatest performance. Thank you for listening. And we've got 15 minutes to answer any questions you might have. And please don't think there's any such thing as a silly question. I would love to. I think this is where we can add some real value and just talk about your lives and stuff. So if you've got any questions, please go for it. Who's going to be the most vulnerable one in the room to start with? There needs to be one, and there'll be loads. Who's going to go first? Yeah. 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 And it's so hard, this, isn't it? Because all of us want success, right? And all of us are at a point. I think no one really talks about this midlife squeeze that I think a lot of us are in, looking around the room, where like your kids are getting older and more demanding. The cost of living has never been higher. You've never earned more but felt poorer. You've got aging parents. You get out of bed and your knees feel absolutely wrecked. You know, when you're 20, 21, no one talks about the fact that this is on the horizon, because no one wants to tell you that's what's going on. And it's such an important moment in life, and I get that. I guess that's why you're reading the book at this time, because you suddenly, things start to make a bit more sense, don't they, when you get to this age? So I was in a really similar position. And by the way, when I talk about all these things, I might have heard them and I might have learned them. It does not mean I'm very good at employing them. I think that's the other thing to say, you know, with my vulnerability hat on. So a couple of years ago, I interviewed a guy called Shane Parrish. And he's written a bunch of optimization blogs called the Farnham Street blogs, and they're very good. They're definitely worth you looking at. And at the time, I was still doing the football for BT Sports, so I was hosting Champions League football, hosting Premier League football. I built Whisper Group into a 100 million turnover business. High Performance at that time was the #3 sports podcast on the planet. 2 lovely kids, great wife, nice house in Norfolk. You know, all the things you'd imagine. I remember interviewing Shane, and I just said to him, I said, mate, can I just have a really honest conversation with you? I feel really flat. I feel overwhelmed. I feel anxious. I don't feel particularly happy. And if I'd have taken a look at the 18-year-old me, I would have thought this is all the things that would make me happy. And he said, well, you tell me what really matters in your life. And I said, obviously my career is like important, but the absolute top three is time with my kids, time with my wife, and a bit of time for myself, maybe going to the gym, having a game of paddle, walking the dog or whatever. He said, cool. He said, how do you run your diary? I said, I have it on my phone. He said, great, show me your phone. So I showed him my phone, and he looked through it. And he said, well, for a start, you've got 14 things in your diary tomorrow. So I'm not surprised you feel overwhelmed. That's a really shit-looking diary, right? Because a human brain was evolved from us cracking nuts on rocks, right? And now here you are absorbing all the world's information and having 14 things in your online diary. Well, it's an overwhelmed situation. He said, but I also don't see anything in here about your wife, anything in here about your kids, anything in here about your own physical health or your mental health or the stuff for you. And I said, yeah, because it's like the most embarrassing thing in the world to have to put time with your wife or kids in your diary. I mean, that feels like you're failing big time there. And he said, no, he said, it's not. He said, we live in a world where there's so much going on, right? If you think of your lives, right, there's loads of urgent things every single day for you to deal with, right? So therefore, the stuff that's important doesn't happen because the urgent stuff kicks the important stuff out of your diary. And you get to the end of the week going, I really should have done that. I should have gotten that. I just couldn't. There was no time. It was mad. It was busy. So his advice to me, which I think is really valuable and plays into your question of how do we do this in the world of like busyness, he understood that I was trying to run multiple businesses and still trying to achieve and do good things. So he said, all you have to do at the start of each week is pay yourself first. And it's the best tip I've ever been given by anyone. So on a Sunday night, I sit down with Harriet, my wife, and we go through the week on our iPhones, the diary for the week. And I just say, look, where can you and I go and grab some breakfast? Where can we grab some lunch while the kids are at school? When can we do something together? And then you do the same with your kids. And one thing I love, I've got 2 kids, one thing I love is time with them on their own. They're so different. I love taking my daughter for little date nights and taking my boy out to play football or whatever. So they go in the diary, and then a bit of time to play paddle goes in the diary. And it's no more time, but those things are non-negotiable. Even the urgent stuff doesn't knock those out of the diary because they're also urgent. Otherwise, what's the point? A true high performer is someone that's happy, right? Rather than, because we have people on our show with not millions, but billions in the bank, and they're absolutely deeply depressed. So who's the winner here? The unhappy billionaire. Yeah, mate, there's a beautiful old phrase, right, which is the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time is right now. And we could all live our lives going, fuck, I wish I'd done this when I was 20 or 21. But you don't want to not do it now because you didn't do it then. Right? You need to realize that now is the moment. And I'm not asking you all to rewire your entire lives. I'm just talking about a very small change. And I promise you, that small change that brings that joy back into your life, along with your achievements, makes all of this so much sweeter. And bearing in mind, I see rooms like this all the time of high achievers. You're all high achievers, you're high performers, you're successful, you're here because you're successful. But it's a lie if we don't talk about the fact that comes at a price. And people keep going, well, you've got to be willing to pay the price. I don't agree with that. I think that you shouldn't have to pay the price to be successful. Life should reward people like you who are ambitious and dynamic and creative and hardworking, and you want the best for yourselves and the best for your kids and the best for your families. But life isn't set up to tell you these things, because all we look is in Instagram, other people who are already up there. And then here comes the envy, here comes the frustration of, better fucking go harder next week and then I'm really going to be okay. Dangerous path. Yeah. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. Mate, it was ever the case. You know the famous explorer Edmund Hillary? When he came back after his first record-breaking climb to the top of a mountain, a reporter said to him, Sir Edmund, what did you think when you got to the top? He said, well, I looked to my left. I saw a higher mountain. Like, there will always be a higher mountain. The reality is on the day that you retire, there'll still be someone further ahead. There'll still be a thing that you want to achieve, a moment that you want to get to. And I'm not saying don't be ambitious. I think ambition is fantastic. That's exactly what I want my kids to be. I want them to be ambitious, leave their mark. There's a beautiful poem, and in the poem it says, I want to be thoroughly used up when I die. I think that's fantastic, to be thoroughly used up, right, when we go. But make sure that you're used up with the things that you really love as well as the high achievement stuff. It's really important. And when someone says it, it makes sense, doesn't it? You think, of course I have to have those things in my life. You assume that they're a distraction, but they're not. They're everything. Those little things are everything. And by the way, can I just say, like, mate, you deserve them. The reason why you're constantly looking and looking and pushing is there's a little voice in your head going, well, you haven't earned that yet. Mate, you have earned it. Look where you are. Look what you've done. You've earned the right to just breathe a little bit in your life. It's very, very important. Good luck with it, mate. No worries. Any other questions? Yes, mate. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. And is it something that you struggle with? Yeah. Are you the sort of sit in bed at night and get on your Instagram and then 20 minutes later you're like, what was the fucking point? Mate, it's amazing. Me and my wife have this thing. We both play the same game where we look at our phone for ages and then we put it down. The first one to put it down goes, will you just get off your bloody phone? And it's like, well, you've 18 of the last 20 minutes, you've been on your phone. So it's a horrible feeling and you just almost can't stop yourself doing it. I mean, the first thing to remind ourselves, right, is that we are up against the billions that are being spent in Silicon Valley to keep us addicted to our mobile phones. There was a bit of leaked data that came out recently from Meta or one of those businesses where they had sent a paper out to their teams explaining why young people need to get onto their devices as early as possible because their brains are more susceptible to dopamine and addiction. They were like, if we get them when they're 16, it's too late. We need to get them when they're 10 or 11. I mean, how scary is that? You know, I think we need to be aware of the situation, right? We need to understand that this is the world we live in. There's no way of you and I living in a world that isn't like this. And so you can either do the hard stuff, which is that you make an agreement with your partner or with yourself that at certain times of the day you put your phone away. You can get those really useful boxes where you lock them up and you put your phone in there, and no matter what you do, that box will not open for 2 hours. Right? You can do that. But I also think that we need to change the narrative around the social media and YouTube and stuff, because I see people all the time saying to their kids, and I'm guilty of it myself with my children, don't waste your time on YouTube. Don't waste your time on Instagram or TikTok. The reality is that I think we live in the greatest time to be alive, right? The opportunities now for all of us in this room are greater than ever before. Every book that's ever been written, we can access for free in the next 30 seconds. That is literally not available to people in previous generations, right? If you woke up this morning and had a hot shower, the King of England wasn't having a hot shower 150 years ago, right? But we live in this world where we constantly telling ourselves, oh, it's rubbish at the moment, oh, everything's crap. It's so not true. But what you need to do is realize the power of what you've got in your hand. Because what you've got in your hand is a library. So you need to go straight in your settings after this conversation and remove the setting on your Instagram or whatever your app of choice is, so that it's not algorithmically driven. You're only following your friends or following accounts that you choose to follow. And then you unfollow everyone, including friends, if they're toxic or they make you feel shit, because there are certain things you look at on social media and feel crap afterwards. And you follow valuable, powerful, brilliant, encouraging, uplifting, optimistic, educational accounts on your socials. You still want to limit the time on your phone, but every time you pick up the phone, you're not feeling envious of someone who's skiing in the Alps or chilling on a private yacht having exited their £9 million business in the Caribbean or whatever. You're seeing stuff that's valuable for you. So you need to take control of this stuff. People are trying to steal the control from us, those big businesses in Silicon Valley. You need to take the control back. So don't play the algorithm game. Don't let them have that power over you. choose the accounts you follow, and you can build an amazing library of the most fantastic minds, brains, and knowledge that you've ever seen. And it's there whenever you want to use it. Still bloody addictive. I think short form content has been created because it works well for our brains. I definitely believe that it affects the attention of young people. I mean, even I find I'm watching a film now. I can't watch a film without picking up my phone and looking at something else on my phone. I think, I used to love, you know, when you used to get into a movie, feel like you're on that beach or whatever, and I can't do it now. I mean, it's damaging, but it is the world in which we live. And, you know, let's just be really honest here. I run a media business, right? I spend my life creating content on high performance, going, that's a great 20-second clip, that will fly, that will get millions of likes and views. So am I the devil or not? I don't know. I've got mouths to feed. Any other questions before I let you get on with the rest of your day? I don't think there are. Listen, was there... Well, it's almost like that was a prepared question. So we wrote a book recently called Micro Habits, right? And I look at Micro Habits as a self-help book for people that don't really read self-help books, right? Because the stuff in there is too obvious to have to charge people for, which thankfully we're not charging you. But it's so simple. Because what happens in life, right, is I think we oversubscribe the importance of big goals and big ambitions. You know, like, call it a BHAG in business, right? Big, hairy, audacious goal. And we don't pay enough attention to the small daily habits that get us to that place. So there's two great quotes that I still live by from my time on high performance. The first one is, focus on the world-class basics. Your life is defined by doing the simple stuff that you do constantly every day really, really well. You know, you don't see it in the moment, but you see it in the long term. It's like an airplane. If you're 1 degree off course, by the time you try and land in Australia, you might be in Japan. It's 1 degree, right? You need to live a life where you're not 1 degree off course, because daily you don't notice it, but over 20 years, you're a long way away from where you need to be. And this comes back to your small daily habits, right? The other one is a great quote from James Clear, who wrote a book called Atomic Habits. And the quote is, every action you take is a vote for the person that you want to be. That is the most empowering thing I think anyone has ever said. Every action you take, the time you wake up, what you eat for breakfast, the way you engage in a session like this, what you do this afternoon, what you say to yourself when you walk in the door, what you say to your family, your kids, every action you take is a vote for the person you want to be. So just decide what sort of person you want to be and then take those actions. And that's in a book that we've written called Micro Habits. It was inspired by Tom Daley, who drew a picture of himself on the top step of the 2012 podium for the Olympics. And he showed it to his coach, and he was really proud, and his coach went, that is a total waste of time. And Tom Daley was like, why? Everyone's told me like life's about goals and achieving your goals. And the coach said, yeah, but that doesn't take into account form or injury or not being selected or other divers being better than you. He said, the only thing that you can control are the daily habits that are within your grasp. So Tom Daley, after that, every single day woke up and just wrote down 3 things each day that he could control in his aim to get to London 2012 and win a medal. And it was, you know, wake up on time, turn up to training on time, eat well, listen to my coach, train harder than everybody else, get to bed early. Simple stuff we can all do. He got a medal at London 2012. And he puts it down to the small daily habits, not the big ambitious goal. So we've got a copy of Micro Habits. I'm going to sign them before I leave, and every single one of you in here, you're going to get a copy of the book. And I hope it's useful. I hope it's helpful. And, you know, if you haven't ever listened to the podcast, please do. But I think, you know, my final message for you is actually something that Phil Neville, the former Everton and Manchester United player, said to us. He said, there's only 3 things you can do in life, and it is the best you can where you are with what you've got. And so many of us spend so much of our time reminding ourselves where we've got it wrong, where we've failed, where we haven't been successful. And we actually need to remind ourselves that that is what we do control. So after today, just do the best you can where you are with what you've got. And I don't think you can go far wrong. And I have taken up enough of your time. Thank you for being so attentive. I've loved this conversation. Thank you very much. Thank you, brother. Top man.